Hey guys, today's video is all about concealer, and it's a question I was asked many times while I was working at the beauty store and many times by friends and family and things like that. So it's something that I decided I wanted to share the information that I have and what I've learned. It is not a comprehensive amount of information. It's not the here-all, be-all, end-all. It's just what I've learned, what I know from my experiences, and things of that nature. So this is going to be primarily focused on under-eye concealer and covering up dark circles and dealing with contrast and stuff like that. So again, it's what I know, it's my experience, it's not all that there is. There's a couple of things, I made notes on my phone. There's a couple of things I want to point out. First, the information that you'll get in this video and that you get kind of in general from anywhere, you have to take it with a grain of salt, because A, your personal preferences always have to come first. Your personal inclinations, your personal routine, the amount of time you're willing to spend each morning or whenever you're putting your makeup on, and then the amount of time you want to deal with makeup throughout the day while you're going about, work or whatever it may be. That is a huge factor, and that is very much a deciding factor for a lot of people. So there's not one product that does it all. There's not a miracle product that will work for you unless you work with it a little bit, if you have dark circles or bags, or both. So that has to be taken into context. If you don't want to spend more than 5 minutes on your makeup, yet you have dark circles that you want to be completely invisible to anybody looking at you on the street, then something's got to give. There has to be a compromise there. And you cannot, you could spend 5 to 10 minutes on your under eyes alone and then, not get anything else done, but, So that kind of stuff has to be considered for you first, and then you can take on any advice that myself or somebody else might give. The main tools that I personally suggest using are first your fingers. I think fingers for concealer are the best, clean fingers, especially if you are acne prone and you don't really want to touch your face that much. The next is a fluffy brush. I think a dense yet, fluffy brush is fantastic for under eye concealer if you don't want to use your fingers. And on the face too, I use that periodically. Then there's a flat brush, which are the, paper thin kind of brushes that you kind of pat it on with. I don't like those. I don't think it disperses the product or blends it very nicely. It's great for, kind of pinpointing, like if you have a small spot or blemish you want to cover and you don't need the makeup everywhere else but the spot. I think it's good for that, but I still personally care to blend it out with a finger. And then finally a sponge. A lot of people use their beauty blender type sponges, the makeup sponges, underneath to kind of blend out a lot of concealer as well as their foundation. I've used it, I like it. They're damp sponges, so that works. There's 2 or 3 main textures that you'll find in concealers. The first texture is probably the most common, I think. It's creamy, it can be more on the liquid side, it can be in a pot. I do have examples from my own makeup stash, but I don't have all of them that I'll talk about, so I'll try to give you some ideas. There are the ones that I have and that I've used the most and enjoy the most. First, I have Amazing Cosmetics concealer. It's a fantastic product. It's great coverage. And I'll just do like one example of each kind. So squeeze tube, and there's the product. That's enough. I could probably cover my entire forehead with that. A little bit goes an incredibly long way. Very dense, and I don't know if you'll be able to see it or not, but you can see it's got a shine to it, and that lets you know that it is creamy. It is emollient. It has a much more, where's my paper towel? There it is. It has a much more, I hate this word, moist texture. And typically these need to be set with something, and we'll go into that momentarily. Drier textures are just exactly like they sound. Some of them are still, you know, blendable enough, and it's not like they're just cakes like they used to be in the 60s, I'm sure. I was not alive then, but I can guess. And I think of products like, I use this one on my face. This is the L'Oreal True Match Blendable, Super Blendable Crayon Concealer. So they can kind of hold up more on their own. They can be shaped and formed and stay that way. This one, I really like this one for the face, and I'll get into more why later. I'm very lazy when it comes to concealer, so this one, you know, flat finish. Usually it's not very shiny. It doesn't add moisture per se, but it definitely still has that coverage. And then you've got products kind of in the middle. And depending on the brand, I think it's a little harder to define, because you can have very, very creamy and emollient crayon concealers, which I think the Urban Decay 24/7 concealers are like that. They're the ones in the pencil. I kind of think too that Benefit Boing is like that. I have, is this lemonade? Okay, so I have a little 2-pan thing. It's Benefit Boing and then lemonade on top. So it's lemonade and this is Boing. Boing is the concealer that I'm referring to. So it's in a pan, and you use your finger and that kind of thing, and it's kind of creamy, but yet it's still kind of dry. This is a great texture. This color is way too dark for me. This is a great texture because it's also thin. It's a great texture for crepiness and stuff like that, if you set it, because you can use such thin layers. It's harder to get that with this, with the Amazing Cosmetics, with a really emollient, creamy product. It's harder to get thinner, like lighter, thinner amounts. You know, unless, if you're trying, it's not hard, but you have to pay attention to how much you're using, or else it will crease. So, those are the primary textures, I think. I mean, you get drier, you get very creamy, very emollient, and that kind of stuff. There's also something, Benefit's Erase Paste, for example, is kind of, it falls under two categories. It's very, very, very emollient. It's very shiny. I mean, you can see it there in the container. But this one is also not skin toned. It's not ivory, it's not nude, it's not beige, it's not tawny or anything like that. It has a peachy undertone. It's technically a corrector. So correctors, which you hear, you know, Bobbi Brown corrector, creamy concealer and corrector and stuff like that. The corrector part of it is meant to be used in conjunction with a concealer, traditionally speaking. So a corrector, if you've got blue shadows down here, or brown or purple or whatever they may be, bags, things like that, like this is the kind of stuff that you use before you put on a concealer. Again, thin, super thin layers. I cannot stress that enough when it comes to products under the eyes, especially, regardless of whether you're using the crayons or you're using something like this, whatever it may be. You've got to use thin layers. That's why using your finger works so well, because you can just press it. You can spread it around. The heat from your skin helps move it around a little bit better. It makes it a little more pliable, and you can really kind of feel how much you've got on there. And some of it does come off on your finger too, so you're getting that, you know, any excess is going to be on your finger. If you are using any kind of concealer and you use too much, it's going to crease. I have lines kind of just right in here, they're more like creases from, you know, squinting and smiling and stuff like that. I always get something in them, because on this eye, for whatever reason especially, I always put too much on. And I'm using a very thin product, and I'm using my finger, and I'm doing all of the stuff that I'm telling to you. I still get too much there. It's not a big deal. You just take a little bit of it off when it collects, and you're done. It's not a big deal. I would frequently get women in the store who just, if they saw that, then the product was a bad product. And multiple times I'm telling them, okay, you've got to use less product. It's always going to do that. It does it on myself. It does it on the 18-year-olds we have in the store. If they use too much, this is what happens. So when you're using under eye concealers especially, if you want them to last all day, if you absolutely do not want to touch them more than once a day, this is where you're going to have to spend a little bit more time in the morning. Not much, but a little bit. If you're using a product like this, the Benefit Erase Paste, which you can use it by itself, it's close enough, but you know. There's a product by NYX, their full coverage concealer, which really isn't full coverage, but it's still a nice concealer. You know, stuff that comes in a pot versus products that come in a stick form. This is like a lipstick bullet, you know, very, again, dry. They'll all be maximized as far as longevity goes if you set them with something. You have to set them with something, preferably a powder. A powder and a creamy product really work well together for longevity. That powder on top of it really helps to make it stay 8, 10, 12 hours. You can use a setting spray if you really don't want to use any powder, but I think that there's enough great setting powders out there to where people with dry skin, dry under eyes like myself can use a powder and use an incredibly light amount of it and still get benefits from it without making your skin look super dry, super ugh, like it kind of can anyway. So you've got these circles. If you're older and you've got more wrinkles and things like that, or if you have drier skin, don't put any, try this anyway, don't put any foundation right up under here. I tend to only keep my foundation around in here. This is kind of where I stop, where the occipital orbital, your eye socket bone is right in here. So I stop there. If you put too many products together, you get too many creamy emollient products together on top of each other, that's also going to cause creasing because it's just too much for this area that it's in. So try this if you've got wrinkles, if you've got crepiness, if you have dry skin, don't put your foundation any higher than about here. And then that way when you are done, when you're ready to put on your concealer, whether you put it on before your makeup or after your eye makeup or after, you can control the amount of product that is there better. So you can also, what I also do is I also put some eyeshadow primer. So when I'm putting on my primer, I put the primer everywhere and I just kind of get up underneath there too. It still gives a super thin layer for the concealer to hold on to without adding bulk. So for example, if you really want to cover up some circles, get something like a corrector. You need 2 products. You need a color that is the right tone for correcting. So for example, if you're using Erase Paste, if you're fair skin like I am, number 1 is for you. They make 3. They don't get horribly dark, which that's a different issue. But grab the one that is appropriate for the depth of color, not the tone, but the depth, because the tone won't match because it's peachy colored, it's salmon colored, or whatever it may be. So take that and do a thin layer first and just pat it down, pat it in, let it set for a second, like 10 seconds, and then do some more if you need it. And again, just keep patting with your ring finger because it has the least amount of pressure. And you just keep patting and patting and patting all over where you need it. The next step is a little bit up to you. It depends on what you want to do. I would say, if it were me, I would take the smallest amount of powder. Like I have some Bare Minerals Well Rested here, which I'll talk more about in a minute. Take whatever is on the lid. There's not much, shake off whatever is there. There's a little bit, blow some of that out, dust it a little bit, take a brush and just ever so slightly put a little bit on top of that, on top of the corrector that you put down. That way, it's got a little bit of something to hold on to. It's a little bit set, but it's still not completely done. So then after you've put the powder down, take your concealer in the shade that matches your skin that you want, whether you want it to be lighter or darker, and then take thin layers and go over top of that. That's, for an everyday realistic option, that's usually the best you can do. And then after you've set that, then put some more powder on it. So you've got your corrector down, 1 or 2 super thin layers, an incredibly small amount of a setting powder, and then your concealer over top of it. Super thin layers of your concealer. And then when you're done with that, then do a little bit more powder so that you're setting all of the product and it's not going to go anywhere. Okay, so if you are like myself and you don't really have too dark of circles or, you know, big bags or anything like that, the thinner products can work really well for you. Thinner as in texture, not thinner as in coverage, because I still want a lot of coverage, but I don't want a lot of texture. And this is the Maybelline Dream Touch highlighting concealer or whatever it is. It's been out for a while. I've talked about it so much, and it's just all I use. It's been really great in the winter when my skin is drier because it's not too much product, but yet I'm still getting some coverage out of it and some brightness. So that's pretty much why I switched from using the Amazing Cosmetics to something like this, because this just got to be too much when my skin turned dry. So I'm a big fan of this, but small doses, ladies, small doses. There's another product by Benefit. Benefit has a lot of really good concealers that have been around for a while. Oh, there were some other ones I wanted to talk about too, but I'll get to that in a minute. So the Benefit Fake Up Concealer. This was something that older women especially really loved. We're talking like 55 and older, where in this area, most of the older women of that age have been in the sun, and sun damage and wrinkles that come along with that. And, you know, something super light, it wasn't going to crease, even though this will, especially if you use too much, but they wanted something they could kind of throw on and go. There's very low maintenance women up here in New England, very low maintenance. As a Southern girl, this was something I was not expecting. But this is, anyway, so sidetracked. This is the concealer that has a core in it. Let's see if I can clean up the... So this, it has a... Come on. It has a core of color, and then it's got kind of a hydrating balm around it. I hate the way it smells, personally, and it just doesn't have enough coverage for me. But it is kind of glossy. It's hydrating. And for people who are more low maintenance, it works for them. So it's a really popular option if you don't need a lot of coverage. The women that were buying it didn't need a lot. They just wanted something that was a little more skincare-like and good for their under-eye area. But if you need something hefty, this isn't the one for you. And, okay, so there's some products by Tarte. Okay, so I was talking about that kind of in-between texture, right? So you've got the really, really creamy ones like the Amazing Cosmetics. Tarte makes one that's very similar to that. I think it's called it's the one in the tube. There's 2 main ones, I think. There may be only 2. There's the one in the squeeze tube. I want to say it's the Maracuja one. And then there's the one in the bullet kind of lipstick style that is the Amazonian clay, I think. I may have those confused, but there's only 2 that I know of. So there's the one in the squeeze tube and then the one in the bullet form. The one in the bullet form actually works very, very, very well for mature skin and crepiness and wrinkles and lines and things like that. Works really well because it offers more coverage, but it's such a super thin texture. I actually like it better than Boing for that kind of a thing, because it's even lighter weight in texture. They just expanded the color range, so you've got a lot of options with it. And you know, if your skin is smooth and you don't have any wrinkles, it's that much better. But it's a fantastic product for older women who want some coverage, who don't want to spend that much time, but yet, you know, they will spend a little bit. They really get a lot out of it. So big fan of that one. The drier textures are really great for the face. That's what I use on my face. I use that crayon, the L'Oreal crayon, because it stays a little bit better. It's not shiny, so anytime you have a shiny concealer on top of a spot you don't want seen, you're just going to see it because of the shine and the reflection of it. So it's got a matte finish, so that's really good. And then it kind of stays in place better than everything else. So I like that. So drier textures, if you have oily skin, if you have really oily skin and oily under eye area, just kind of everywhere, the drier texture it's great for you. I mean, you can use a creamier texture, but you can use a drier one if you get really, really oily and still set it with a powder, and that will combat the oiliness throughout the day. You're probably still gonna have to touch it up at some point if you're really oily, but you know, we do what we can and we work with what we have. A really, really, really good concealer, regardless of what you're going for, is the NYX HD Creamy Concealer. Very, very opaque, great coverage, but yet it's still thin enough to blend. I mean, it's just so nice. Great for the under eyes because it dries down to a nice finish, and it dries down to a thin enough texture. So I'm a big fan of that one. For setting powders, you can do your typical translucent setting powder. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Whatever you use on your face, as long as it's super finely milled and very, very tiny grains, then you can use that under your eyes. You just use considerably less. Something I really love, because I still get darkness and I like a bright under eye, is Bare Minerals Well Rested. And this is that kind of cult, kind of yellow brightening powder that really, really, really works. I mean, it just does. I have to be careful with it because of the dryness under my eyes, and I cannot use a lot. When I was using the Amazing concealer, I was setting it with this, and it could be too much. Or I'd have to really be careful about how much I used, because then it was like, ooh, do you need a glass of water? But I highly recommend this one, Well Rested, if you are needing a setting powder under the eyes. It's fantastic. Okay, we are winding down. I'm going to list all of the products I've talked about and the categories I have put them under in the description bar down below, so that you can go back through and see, do I want a creamy concealer? This is a good option, I think, you know, blah, 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 blah. I want to make sure I've talked about everything that I wanted to talk about. You can use a setting spray for, I don't know if I said this or not, but you can use a setting spray like Benefit's Urban Decay's All Nighter, but you're probably gonna get better results with powder. So if you're really trying to avoid powder, this may be a place where you just use it super sparingly. Because I think there's something about that those two textures binding together that really works. So keep that in mind. Was there anything else I wanted to tell you? I have a lot of makeup on today and I'm okay with that. If there was something I didn't cover in this, you know, please let me know in the comments and I will answer them in a separate video. I guess that's it. Thank you so much for listening to me ramble about concealers. I hope it's been helpful, and like I said, let me answer some questions. If there's some that you have that I didn't really address, or you're not sure how something works, let me know and we'll go from there. I hope you have a great week. Definitely stay tuned, because next week I'm going to be doing my March favorites, which I'm really excited about because I've got some really good products so far, and the month's not even over yet. And y'all have a great week, and I'll talk to you soon.